guys, I'm Alicia, Camacho, and welcome to this week's episode. This week we are talking about movies for our ears, and what do I mean by that? Guys, how do you not know movies for your ears? It's podcasts. Whoop whoop! Guys, podcasts are the thing right now. Actually, podcasts have been a thing for a while, and some of us have only got on the train like a little bit late, but it's okay. So, podcasts, you would ask yourself, why would you want to listen to something where people just talk and share their opinion? Ha ha ha! Well, there's actually a whole new world of podcasts, and they've taken things so differently and made things a little bit more entertaining. So much better than listening to the radio DJs speak about their toe fingers. I don't know. I don't listen to radio anymore. I'm going to give you some information about it, as well as which podcasts to listen to, what to look out for when you're looking for a podcast to listen to, and just the overall generalization of how podcasts came about. It's very interesting, guys. Where did these little movies for our ears come about? Well, there was a BBC journalist called Brian Hammersley, right, who actually started the whole podcast movement in February of 2004, and from there it just grew. The word itself, podcast, is the love child between two words in our dictionary. One is iPod and the other one is broadcast, and they bam, made podcast. How cute is that? What is podcast? Well, podcast is basically talk radio that has been transformed and recorded in a way that you can then save it as an audio file and then download it and listen anytime, anywhere, and it is on demand. So, which is why podcast is so innovative. But you think, why would anybody want to listen to people talking for hours and hours and hours and hours? And what's the point? Why don't I just listen to radio? Well, podcast has specific content, so each podcast creator has their own sort of way and style of discussing things. They may talk about various different topics. So generally, it's a more specified sort of platform for you to put content out there. The idea of podcast itself is nothing new. Where talk radio was a big thing in the 1930s, you would listen to either stories or the news, and then basically, it got transformed into what we know as podcasts today. Podcast is recorded and radio is not. So those are the two main differences, in case you were well, they're the same, No, they're not the same. In 2005, iTunes then did an upgrade on their iPods and their phones, their phones, allowing podcasts to be downloaded onto their devices. So that changed the game, okay? Now you could have a podcast in one place. You didn't have to download another app or anything like that. You could download it and then put it on your iPod, and you would have podcasts to listen to. I think over the time, people have gotten a bit more creative as to what they put out there on podcasts, which is something really exciting, because it's another form of entertainment, which is really, really cool. But also dude, another one? When am I going to listen to all of this? Sometime beginning of last year, I somehow got into podcasting, and I started listening to a whole bunch of series. I slowly started looking for shows that entertain me. My best advice is podcasts is for when you're on the go, or when you're bored at work and you just you don't want to listen to the radio, but you just want to learn something while you're canning and while you're working. And that is one of the reasons why I got into podcasts. However, and this is a really important thing to take note of, you need to find yourself the right podcast. That is the whole thing about podcasts. You need to find the podcast that is literally going to entertain you and not just annoy you. And make sure that they're contributing positively to your life. Length of a podcast also plays a huge role in keeping my attention and picking a podcast to listen to. Some people can listen to 2-hour-long podcasts. My brother is one of them, and I just have no idea how he does it. But 2 hours is just too long. No, my attention span does not last that long. When I choose a podcast, it has to be a maximum of an hour long. I avoid anything longer than that. Now, I am a information eating machine. I love information. Guys, how do you think I got all the information that I I know it's because I sit and listen to podcasts. No, I was naturally born smart and naturally curious, but I do like to listen to podcasts that are going to give me information that I can share with other people. And trust me, there is a lot to share. The way the person speaks. Now, I know this is a really petty thing, like, oh, I don't listen to that podcast because that person speaks funny. No, I'm not trying to be ugly, but generally there are some people who just have the most annoying voices, or they just sound like they're half asleep while they're talking, or they just mumble, or they're just their voice is not pleasant to listen to. I'm sorry. You're gonna be spending time with this person intimately in your earbud, in your ear hole, okay? They're getting real close and personal with your brain and your information neurons. So they should be saying something positive and uplifting so that you don't waste your time. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite podcasts because I just love to share things with everybody. And why keep a good thing to yourself when you can share it and brighten someone else's day? So the first category that I'm talking about is my lifestyle category, and it involves 3 podcasts. The first one is Views by David Dobrik and Jason Nash. Now, Views is really, really cool because the guys just talk about really chill things, and their opinion is actually quite fascinating and really, really funny, and they're super entertaining guys. The next podcast that I like to listen to is called The Empty Bowl. Now, this is a meditative serial podcast. So the 2 co-hosts, is Justin McElroy and Dan Gobert, and they talk about all the different serials with meditative, wow, I cannot speak today, but meditative music in the background. And you know what's great about this podcast is that even though I can't actually eat the American cereal, it will make me look forward to what is available in America, and at least America has some positive things going for them, like decent cereal. If I'm feeling really tense, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but that music and talking about cereals, which seems completely pointless, it just calms me right down, guys. So if I ever get a little too crazy, just put the cereal podcast on and I'll be mellow out. Yeah. The last podcast in my lifestyle category is Anna Faris Unqualified, or Anna Faris. So she's a really, really great actress, and her podcast is also really, really interesting. And it's just such a great way to get to know someone a little bit more by listening to their podcast and what they have to say. Information category. The first one is a podcast called Law, and it is narrated by Aaron Mankey, and he talks about all these weird and wonderful little stories that just give you goosebumps all the time. The podcast I listen to is Sawbones, and it has Justin and Sydney McElroy. Sydney is a doctor, Justin is a comedian, and they debunk a lot of weird health things. So if you want to know about a particular kind of flu or virus or vaccine, they are super funny. And they give you a lot of facts. Sydney goes into details as the history of it, where the origins of a particular procedure came from, and it's just loads of fun. Next podcast that I listen to is Splat. Now, Splat is narrated by Brooke Wiseman and Bridget McNamara, and these 2 girls are breaking down sex in the city. Now, they are the inspiration and the reason why I started watching Sex and the City. So when I started listening to the podcast, I had not watched a single episode of Sex and the City. I did watch the movies, but it didn't really make much sense to me. But I started listening to the podcast, and I was like, wow, this is actually really interesting and really, really fun. But I wasn't watching the series, and then when I came to South Africa, the series was available for me. So now I've started watching the series. But they're already on season 6, I'm still in season 4, so it's going to take me a while before I catch up with them. Category that I really, really enjoy is the film entertainment category. A24 Podcast, which is a production company that produces a lot of independent kind of films. They are just brilliant. They only release a podcast every month or so, and they normally put 2 very different actors or 2 friend actors together, and they just talk about what they're doing, how things are going. Pilot TV podcast, where they talk about all the TV shows that are coming through and the behind the scenes of what is happening, some facts, what is going on. Sometimes they can prevent you from watching the wrong thing. Empire Film podcast. Now, Empire Film talks about films, right? And I love the magazine, and it's not available in South Africa, but their magazine is fantastic. And what I do is I just love to listen to what's like what they're talking about, because film is my thing, and I just love listening to the directors, the actors, the producers, the writers when it comes to the stories and how they've put something together, what it is like working on set, all the struggles, and guys, it makes me so excited for what I can do in my life. The next group is my religious and spiritual kind of podcasts. I like to listen to a lot of give me information when it comes to Christianity, because believe it or not, being a Christian is really, really tough. And so sometimes you need a little bit more guidance than just your Sunday service. You need like other perspectives, you need other teachings, you need someone to guide you on like the Bible and what is happening and what is going on with that Bible thing. And so there are two podcasts that I really, really enjoy listening to. The first one is Passion City Church DC with Pastor Ben Stewart. He is just such an awesome guy. He preaches in a way that like makes you feel comfortable, but he also like is like really firm in his beliefs, and so you know that he's not wavering, and there's no judgment in what he has to say. It's just he's teaching you and he's guiding you, and it's something really, really awesome to listen to. The next one is Church Home by Pastor Judah Smith, and he is really, really awesome and like so entertaining. And what I really like about Judah Smith is that he's like, I'm human, you're human, we're both learning how to do this thing called life. I'm gonna try and help you and guide you. You just have to go along with me and not judge me and not put me on a pedestal because I'm not perfect. And that is like so great. Like, he's the only pastor that I've ever heard talk about throwing a temper tantrum on a golf course because he didn't win. Last category that I really, really enjoy listening to when it comes to podcasts is my story categories. The first one is Homecoming. Now, you've heard of Homecoming. There was a big thing about it, and it was on Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime made a TV show with Julia Roberts. And guys, I haven't watched a TV show, but if the podcast is anything to go by, the TV show will be amazing. But the podcast itself, oh my gosh, the podcast is insane. And then we have Dirty John, which is a podcast that I really want to listen to. Netflix has released a TV show of it, and I watched episode 1, and it was really unsettling, guys. It was like very creepy, very like, oh my word, like what's gonna happen? I'm gonna start listening to the podcast because I want to know if it's as scary as a television show. And the last one is The Horrors of Dolores Roches, and this is about a woman who gets released from prison, and she starts like giving massages and stuff, but she seems to have a bit of like a temper in the sense that she starts like killing people. Yeah. So the guy that like she's working and living with sort of starts taking care of the bodies. And I'm just gonna say, if you don't have a strong stomach, maybe this is not the podcast for you. I just thought I'd speak about podcasts because they're really, really fun and entertaining, and a lot of people are getting into the whole podcast thing. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Please share this with all your friends. And guys, thank you so much for your support. I really, really appreciate it. If you want to follow me on my social media, you can go to my Instagram, which is Alicia Camacho _official, and on my Twitter, Alicia C _official. Remember, you are awesome, you are great, and you are loved.